Just share this first. One of the most challenging things I think as county chair is finding someone to speak at your Lincoln Reagan dinner. It's not that it's so hard because we're not a nice group of people or that we're not a beautiful area to visit, but typically politicians, as the judge and I were just talking, target certain areas where they know the votes are. So they obviously would be very cordial and accept an invitation to a Wayne County, an Oakland County, the Lansings, the Jacksons, the Grand Rapids, etc. You say Oscoda and Alcona, or Ionsco, Alcona, and they go, well, let me check my calendar and I'll get back to you. This year I was incredibly blessed. We were. Because on my first call, I was told that the one person they would like to see us have is Supreme Court Justice David Viviano. And he and his father, as you know, drove here from the Detroit area, Wayne County, and they're driving back tonight due to some church functions in the morning that the judge has to be at. But I thought this year, how cool would it be to have a Supreme Court judge, albeit at the state level, when we know what will or will not happen at the federal level, depending on our Supreme Court, the national federal Supreme Court, depending on who's elected, because that person will appoint a number of Supreme Court judges, which could change the shape of this country entirely. Years to come. So I am honored, and I hope you all give a good welcome to Supreme Court Justice David Viviano.
Thank you, Jeff, and thank you, Larry, and everyone else who had anything to do with putting together this marvelous affair. This is a beautiful venue, and it was worth the drive for my father and I to be with all of you and to have this great view out the window. You know, it's as I sit here and Senator Stamis took a little bit of my thunder, I was thinking about Congressman Benishek and Representative Battaglia, and what it means to be a public servant and to be a citizen legislator and to do your public service and then to go back and re-enter the private sector and continue being a contributing member of society. And so I too want to thank both of you for what you've done for all of us in Michigan and in your case across the country in the Congress. And I think of it also in terms of all of the other candidates who are here who are trying to enter public service. I learned that at a young age with my father. He ran first for probate judge in 1992. We've always been active in our community. And as has already been stated tonight, it's a lot of work, and you're away from your family. And we took a long drive today to be with all of you because it's really important to reach out and to be connected to the citizens of Michigan. I learned, Peter, that my backyard is really big right now. It turns out there's 82 other counties other than Macomb. But it's important work that we're doing. I'm, of course, honored to be where I am on the Supreme Court. I thought, and I think I have a little more than 2 minutes, right? But I promise not to go too long. But I wanted to talk a little bit about my background because one of the reasons I came is I haven't been to this area of the state. And when I first was appointed, I was really active. I went to a lot of places. And my goal this time, I ran in the last cycle, was to try to get to the places that I didn't get to the last time. So I appreciate the opportunity and the invitation to be here. I thought I'd tell you just a little bit about my background, talk about the rule of law, what it is and why it matters, and then talk just a little bit about this year's election on our court, and then lastly, answer any questions that you have. So just real brief, my background. I grew up in Macomb County. I was on the circuit bench, actually with my father for 4 years, which was a unique honor and privilege for me to be able to serve in that capacity. I intended to mention I went to Hillsdale College along with all 6 of my siblings. All of us graduated from Hillsdale together. My father and I were actually at the college last weekend because U.S. Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas was there to give the commencement address. Yeah. We had the privilege of spending a few moments with him before we went on to the Branch County Lincoln Day. I'm happy to report to you that he was in very good spirits, very engaging and gregarious, and I was happy to see him that way because he is, now that Justice Scalia is gone, really our standard bearer, I think, on that court. So we were privileged to be there. But I was circuit judge in Macomb County. I became the chief judge my last year or so on that court, and then Governor Snyder appointed me to the Michigan Supreme Court in 2013. I ran in 2014 with all of your support, was able to fill out the remainder of the partial term that I was appointed to, and of course now I'll be standing for the full term. In terms of my judicial background, I really very much enjoyed being the chief judge because there's a lot of administrative work that needs to be done in our court system, and I hope the candidates who are here thinking of running for, or actually running for circuit judge, keep that in mind, that in addition to handling cases, which is really important, we also need to think about how our courts run and whether we're serving the public in the best way that we can. So just briefly, some of the initiatives that I've been involved in, at least I'll just tell you one, is e-filing. We worked with the legislature and with the governor, and we were able to have a bill passed to fund a statewide e-filing, anywhere, anytime e-filing system in Michigan, which when it's put together means that you'll be able to file in any court in Michigan from your computer as long as you're connected to the internet, and it'll be done with no filing fee. And so that'll be a substantial reform in advance in Michigan, and our opening our courthouse doors and becoming more accessible to the public. So the rule of law, that's my judicial philosophy. I thought I'd talk about what it means just briefly, and then why I think it's important. What it means is really pretty simple. It means that judges are not the policymakers in our government. We have great legislators, those who are in this room and all across the state of Michigan, who make the laws. And it's important because they're reflecting all of your will. They're mostly elected every 2 years, some every 4 years, but they represent the popular will. So when we're fed up and we don't want to take it anymore, their job is to help enact new policies and change the policy direction of our state. And it really is not the job of judges to have those policy issues relitigated in the courts. And so our job in the judicial branch of government is to interpret the laws and give fair meaning to the words that the legislators have chosen, and to give fair meaning to the words that are in our Constitution, that the people who ratified the Constitution chose. And so in that way, we know in advance what the rules of the game are. The law applies equally to everyone. The rule of law judicial philosophy doesn't favor any group or individual in advance. It's one of the things about being a judge and being fair and impartial that you learn, I learned from my father, is that we're not there to make everybody happy. You know, most of the time, at least one party that leaves the courthouse is going to be unhappy. So it's really important that we're fair and unbiased, and that we apply the law equally, according to its terms, to all the people who come before the court. And so, now why is that important in the bigger picture sense? Why is the rule of law philosophy? We all learned this in grade school, at least I hope we did, and I hope as we talked at our table they start to teach it more to the young people who are in school now. It's important because our founders understood that if we didn't design a government to protect individual liberty, that the government would grow, in some ways as it has grown, and overtake our freedom. And so they designed for the first time in human history a government of divided powers. No longer would all powers be invested in the monarch, the executive and the legislative and the judicial power. Instead, it would be divided into three separate departments, three branches of government. And that's served us really well, as long as we understand that at the national level. Important, obviously, that the executive, the president's job is to enforce all the laws. When the president does that, the system works well. We in the judicial branch are there to interpret and apply the laws that come to us. We don't make the laws. And that's one of the ways that we check, each branch checks the other, and that we limit the growth of government and that we protect individual liberty. And I'm pleased to report that we have a strong rule of law majority on the Michigan Supreme Court. It wasn't easy. There have been a lot of battles over the years to make that possible, starting really with former Governor Engler, who still takes a lot of pride, I can tell you, having spoken to him recently, over the work that he did in the Michigan Supreme Court. Although, interestingly, when I tried to give him credit for the way the court has turned out, he always says, you know, we sort of started this movement, but you have to give the credit to the people of Michigan, because they're the ones who, in all of the succeeding elections, have decided that they wanted a court that stays within its lane, that understands its constitutional role, that we have judges who understand that they're not there to change or overrule or modify the policy compromises that are made over at the state capitol. And so that sort of flows into my next topic. I guess a little more of our history on the court. In the last election, you may recall Justice Brian Zara and I out together on the ballot. We were slotted separately. For some unusual reason, he has sort of, all three of us in a row had the same political path that we're on. So he ran for a 2-year term in 2012 and then a full term in 2014. The big planes out there? Yeah. So I had the same good fortune or not, having to run in 2014, then again statewide in 2016. And my newest colleague, Jo Larson, who you may have heard of because she made some national headlines, and I'll tell you a little bit more about her. But she will be running this year for a partial term, and then if all goes well, she'll run for a full term in 2018. So she and I are working very hard, and I want to tell you a little bit about her. Joan was appointed to fill the seat vacated by Justice Mary Beth Kelly around 6 months ago, maybe a little give or take. Joan is a very talented woman. She was on the law school faculty at the University of Michigan Law School, where I also attended, although I was long graduated before she got there. She had the honor of clerking for Antonin Scalia on the U.S. Supreme Court, and he was very fond of her. She actually spoke at his memorial service a month or two ago. And she also worked in the Bush administration for a time in the Department of Justice, and she's doing a marvelous job on our court. And so, and I guess most recently, you may have heard that Donald Trump named 11 people. I think Congressman Benishek mentioned that. And believe it or not, Jo Larson was one of the names on that list. So she's someone who is really already garnering national attention. And so she's been working really hard. I'm pleased to report. And one of the things I say, I think it's sort of interesting, following on the conversation we've been having, one of the things I say about her is, unlike myself, I sort of grew up in this business of judicial politics and local politics, and I ran for county prosecutor in 2004 and won the Republican primary, but lost in the fall to the current prosecutor in Macomb County. So we needed to get rid of the straight ticket before 2004. Maybe I'd be the prosecutor there. It would have been. But Joan never has been involved in elected office. She's never gone through elections. And so for her to be willing to leave the law school faculty at Michigan, where there are a few conservatives, her and her husband, she always says there are 2 of the 3 people. She said there's 3 conservative faculty members and 2 of them live in her household, she always says. But for her to be willing to get in this game and to run statewide, have to run statewide and try to learn to get out to all the counties and all that, it's really great. I have to say that the county parties are really welcoming and helpful, and because we'll raise as much money as we can, but we can never raise enough money to run the ads and do the mail that we would need to do without the help we get at the grassroots level, where people talk about judicial elections and why they matter. We're on the nonpartisan part of the ballot, and so you have to vote all the way to the end of the ballot to make sure that you're voting for judges, and why the rule of law matters, and why it matters to have good people at every level of our judiciary who understand what a judge's role is, and who are hardworking people, and who are people who are going to treat others with respect, and who do the things we need to do to make our government work. So I give her a lot of credit, because she was a tenured professor at a great law school, and she decided that this was important to her and her family. She has 2 young children, and I should have mentioned, but I didn't, I omitted to, that my wife, Niran, and I have 4 young children. The oldest, my son Tony, will be 6 in June. The youngest, Cecilia, just turned 1 in April. So we have a very active household. Tony's kindergarten class is hosting at the 10 o'clock mass tomorrow at St. Thecla. And so we were actually going to stay overnight, but I really would like to be home and to be able to see how well my son does holding the door for everybody and sitting in the front row at church. I'm sure that's not going to go well. We usually sit in the cry room where I play mostly like a goaltender. I feel like a soccer goaltender, trying to keep all the kids in there. And so in any event, that we have a busy household, and that's part of the sacrifice that we have made. I was reelected unopposed in 2012 as a circuit judge, as the chief judge, and really enjoying my life there when I received this call from the governor. And when I told my wife what it would mean to us in terms of running for office, she was pregnant then, I think, with our third child, and she promptly burst into tears. And asked me, tell me again how this is good for our family. And to show you a little bit about how I was raised, my mother had a similar reaction initially when I told her that I had been offered this position. She said, you absolutely can't do that. You have small children at home and your wife needs you and you'll be gone too much. We got off the phone, and then she called me back about a half hour later and said, you absolutely have to do this. You have this opportunity to serve the state of Michigan, and it's this is really important, and we're all going to pitch in, help out, and help you get through these elections. And really, I feel that when I come to places like this, and have for the last few years, that everyone else has treated me the same way. So I want to thank all of you for your support of our court, and for your support of me personally and my father. When we come to these events, he's 80 years old, by the way, quite old enough to get the book, but I have to tell you, he has a certain way with people and energy and enthusiasm that when we leave these rooms, that I try to do my best to work the room, but somehow he's always talked to every single person here, so that's where I've been trying to model myself. So with that, I think I've probably used up my time, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. Yes?
I got a question, Judge. I have, how is court costs determined? Who determines court costs, number one? And number two, how do you justify somebody that's not got a lot of money, court costs of $1,200, $1,400 on a case? That's pretty draconian, if you ask me. First of all, who's determined how the court costs are set?
Yeah, it's a good question. Court costs are determined largely by statute. Fines are set by statute. Court probation fees, there's a statutory scheme that's based on your monthly income level. But we've actually just had a court fight over how much power judges should have to set costs at any level they want to. And our court actually determined that the legislature hadn't given this plenary authority that judges had been using. And now the legislature's passed a new statute that focuses judges a little bit more, that if you're going to assess court costs, it has to be closely related to the actual cost of the proceeding in the courthouse and the functioning of your case. So it is, I agree with you, very unfair that you go from one court to the next. In one place, the court costs are relatively modest, and the very next jurisdiction over, they're way out of whack. And I think it has been that way. I think it's less so now. It's starting to get more uniform. The other thing to keep in mind, of course, is that if someone's indigent, they should raise that. We just, I want to preempt something we just did. We considered and passed some rules on ability to pay, because it has been the case in Michigan more often than it should be that folks have been spending time in jail because they didn't have the money to pay fines and costs. And so, of course, that's not the way it ever should be in our country. That's not how our justice system is designed. And so we just recently, I may be preempting something, the order may not have even come out yet, but if it hasn't, it will be in the coming days. You'll see something about that probably.
Well, you see a fine of whatever, and then you see court costs more than the fine.
And sometimes it's the judge, they want to do courthouse. It has something to do with funding of our courts. We were talking about the funding of roads. And courts are all locally funded too, and so sometimes judges would say, well, we're going to have a building fund. And someone would pass through that jurisdiction and have to pay for that. It's not how it should be. Now I'm speaking, I used to be, like my dad, a lawyer and handle these cases in court, and so you can see it firsthand. Anyone else? That's it, everybody wants to go home?
They want to win the prizes over.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm waiting for
Maureen.
What I would like to say is, I have some flyers from Justice Viviano and Justice Larson's on the first time. Anybody who would like one to take home, because the justice was apparently unwilling to give them to me. So, but he was willing to give them to me.
No, but I'm glad you said that, because we did. I had my campaign intern put on all your tables our business card, which has our Facebook page, which is a great way to connect with the campaign. And I will give you some more of our flyers, and I very much appreciate all of you spreading the word and passing those out. We have, Joan and I both have websites. We're on Facebook. Hers is probably a little more active than mine now that she's a national media person. But that's a great way to connect. If you want to see what my children look like, for example, I exploit them on my Facebook page.
On the flyer too.
Yeah, on the flyer too, right. When I ran, as was mentioned, before I had children, I could only exploit my nieces and nephews, so now I can use my own children. Yeah, and on a serious note, one of the great things about growing up for us and for my nieces and nephews and now my kids is being involved in politics and being in parades and learning what this country really is about and how we make it work. Now, the downside is my kids like parades so much that I have to go to parades even when I'm not in them. So I sit on the sidelines and all the politicians make fun of me. How come you're not in the parade? But it's been a lot of fun for us.
Justice, could you maybe explain to the group the difference between a state legislator running and a circuit court judge or a justice running in how you can raise dollars, how one has to be done, so you have to close your campaign immediately following the election, and how literature and other things can be dispersed?
Okay, so that's a lot in there. I'll try to unpack it as best I can. When you run for office in a partisan office, you can raise money pretty much on an ongoing basis. You have an open campaign account. You can raise money. Jim's able to raise money even though he's not running. I hope he's not doing too much of that, but he can keep his campaign account open and he can continue to work and to connect with voters. Judicial campaigns are different. We're not allowed to have ongoing campaign accounts, and so we can only raise money in our election year. We start on February 15th, and the account has to be closed out by the end of the year. All the money has to be spent or returned to the donors or donated to the State Bar Foundation, and that's it. And so one of the, as I was talking about running, what it means for us to run statewide 2 times in 3 years, not even the governor, of course, has to do that, but we have to start and stop our campaign. So I started from scratch again on February 15th. We've just started raising money again. To run a statewide campaign, we have to raise significant resources to try to run TV ads statewide. And so that's a significant difference. Other differences are judicial candidates are not allowed to directly solicit or receive contributions under our canons of ethics. And so that means we have to put together committees who can do that on our behalf. It's challenging. Having said that, people have been very generous and very supportive, and there are lots of ways to help. Giving money is one, spreading the word is another. Going on Facebook and liking our page and then sharing it with all of your Facebook universe is really helpful around election time. So in terms of literature, sending out literature, I would say largely that's the same. We're all trying to get our message out. I end up meeting, and I'm sure others do, with young people who are interested in public office and talking through what's important. How do you get elected? And you get elected by connecting with voters. And how many, in the business we call that voter contacts. And the best ones are in person. So we're here talking to you. Hopefully you're getting to know me and I'm getting to know you. Knocking on your door, that's a great voter contact. Talking to people on the telephone. Other ways are, of course, through social media and through literature that we send people in the mail. And it's hard, and people don't want all this literature, and sometimes they throw it away, and it costs money, and the postage, and you have to raise money. But we only have so much time and so many different ways to connect with people. But that's what politics is about, and that's what all of us have to do. We all share that in common. I will say this, there's one significant difference between being in the legislative branch and being in the judicial branch, and that is we're not a majoritarian branch of government, which may be counterintuitive because I'm here trying to convince all of you to vote for me. But when I make a decision on a case, what I think a majority of people want is not a consideration. That's not a valid consideration. I have to follow the law, even if it's unpopular to do that. And again, I have a pretty good role model. But sometimes you have to stick up for the constitutional rights of some very unpopular people who are accused of doing some very terrible things. And that's what a judge's job is. And you have to rule according to the law on every case that comes before you. And as I tell people on the campaign trail, to be a good judge, you have to rule the correct way according to the law, even if it's going to upset your friends, people in the community that you know or who contribute to your campaign, and who end up in your court with the case, and you have to rule correctly. And some people just won't understand that, and so you have to internalize that. And you also have to rule correctly according to the law if it means you're going to lose the next election. which is another thing that's hard to internalize. But our job is not to rule differently in an election year than we rule in a non-election year. And so, you know, that's a big difference being in the judicial branch. And that's, you know, it's an interesting thing about having elected judges, because you have that tension. I think there's pros and cons to having elected judges, but one of the cons is you have that tension. We're not a majoritarian branch of government. Yes?
You mentioned having kind of an association of judges. We've all known about activist judges who kind of stretch or redefine the laws in order to make it fit their agenda. Is there some way for this association of judges to police their own in some manner, to be able to, you know,
Yeah,
throw
well,
a black check next to their name or something, so that when it comes to being appointed or whatever else, they're already being looked at?
Yes. So we have different levels in our judiciary, right? We have, from the district courts and the municipal courts through the probate, where my dad served, and circuit, and up to the Court of Appeals and the Supreme Court. So one way is we get to review the lower court's legal decisions. So if we have judges who are, go out there and not hewing closely to their role as judges, then we have the opportunity to correct those decisions. You can become a judge in our system either by appointment or by election. I was first elected in an open race, like the race that's going on here in these 4 counties. But if you're appointed by the governor, then you have to run and have that choice approved in the next election. I will tell you that Governor Snyder, in my view, this is a little biased, my mother told me this, has made very good judicial selections on our court. Very conservative, rule of law oriented people, Justice Zara, Justice Larson. And so one way to do it is to make sure that governors and presidents are having, viewing the courts in the right manner and understanding what is needed in the judiciary. It is true, certainly at the national level, that people do not seem to get more conservative once they get to the bench. It always seems to go the other way. And so we really do need to be careful about the type of people, particularly at the national level. As we all know, those judges are appointed for life tenure. So once they're put on the court, that's what's gotten, I think, a little easier with the internet and websites and Facebook, but look for substantive information and ask questions. Just like you said, I really appreciated what you said as a candidate. I'm out there, I'm available. You can connect with me on social media or by email. I just gave everyone our campaign email address. Ask questions of candidates to make sure that you're supporting the right kind of people. Anybody else? All right, folks. Thanks again for having us.